Hello, my name is DJ Cotton Candy, and I am a co-founder of the People's Collective for Justice and Liberation, as well as a core member and executive director of Asian Solidarity Collective. The People's Collective for Justice and Liberation does a visual description for purposes of accessibility. I am a queer, disabled Filipinx, and I am wearing a black t-shirt with white text that reads, People's Collective for Justice and Liberation. And I am in my music studio office. Behind me is a DJ equipment, a window with trees and sunlight coming in with a photo frame hanging on my wall. Welcome to the Town Hall on Anti-Asian Racism by the People's Collective for Justice and Liberation, with the organizational co-sponsors, which I will also take time to read and name with pauses. 18 Million Rising, AAPIs for Civic Empowerment, Education Fund, API Chaya, Asian Pacific American Labor Alliance, AFL-CIO, Asian Pacific Islander Community Actions, Asian Solidarity Collective, Ballot Initiative, Strategy Center, the Bulacan Center for Filipino Studies, Can't Stop, Won't Stop Consulting, Indigenous Environmental Network, Empowering Pacific Islander Communities, Freedom Inc., The Gathering for Justice, Highlander Research and Education Center, Justice League New York City, Ka'aha Lahui o Olekona Hawaiian Civic Club, O Oregon, Ami, Southwest Washington. Ka'leili'i Halia, Oka Lokelani, Massage Parlor Outreach Project, Movement for Black Lives, Pillars of the Community, the People's Collective for Justice and Liberation, Release MN8, Sacramento API Regional Network, Transgender Law Center, United We Dream, University of Connecticut, Asian and Asian American Studies Institute, and WPN Power.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gregory Sandana, and I'm the president and co-founder of Can't Stop, Won't Stop Consulting. I am a queer Filipinx who is wearing gray glasses and a rainbow splash rompin, standing in front of my office with bookshelves, books, frames, and candles behind me. Candy and I are proud to be the co-hosts and co-organizers of this town hall and co-founders of the People's Collective for Justice and Liberation. This is a reminder that you must click closed captions in the bottom menu to see the closed captions, and to all of our speakers to please be mindful of your pace, to pause for 15 to 30 seconds when transitioning for the ASL interpreters. We will also spotlight the ASL interpreters, and if there are any issues, please be sure to mention something in the chat or the comments, as we have volunteers who are monitoring and will do their best to address any questions or concerns that are raised. Please use hashtag Building Solidarity and hashtag Stop Asian Hate for the conversation today. We will be live tweeting from our Twitter account at peoples_collect, and streaming live on Facebook as well from the People's Collective for Justice and Liberation and the Gathering for Justice, and on our Twitch, twitch.tv/People's Collective for JL. We also want to remind you to hit gallery view at the top right to see multiple screens at the same time. We will also have an amazing graphic facilitator, Liz Niarjos, who will be providing us with a creative graphic recording based on the conversation, and we will share it with everyone in the following days after the town hall. Please be sure to follow us on social media if you aren't already.
We wanted to start off with sending our love and our condolences to the family and the friends of the 8 people, including 6 Asian women, who were murdered in Atlanta, Georgia. Out of respect to the families and following the lead of the local organization, Asian Americans Advancing Justice Atlanta, we will not be sharing the names of the victims until there is full consent to do so, and hope you will join us in observing this protocol. Our hearts are with you all and all of our Asian communities as we are in mourning and in grieving. If we can have a moment of silence. We are now in our 11th town hall. It is also very surreal that while we are now on our 11th town hall, it has also been exactly 1 year when Greg and myself came together to coordinate this very same town hall on anti-Asian racism. And 1 year later, we are still organizing, building solidarity, and united against white supremacy. When Greg and I decided to continue on with this work after our first town hall, it quickly evolved into the People's Collective for Justice and Liberation, along with some badass organizing committee who really coordinated today's town hall, an advisory council, including the University for Justice and Liberation in partnership with the Bulasan Center. We had no idea how big this was going to become, nor did we realize the impact it would have as it brought people together and forged new organizers into the movement. It deepened my friendship with Greg, one of the most profound friendships I've had in my life, with such a trusted comrade I know who has been more than ride or die. What we did know was how important relationships building is to this work of building solidarity and the kind of grace we needed to give one another, while we also challenged one another. We knew that as we organized discussions around the ongoing rise of anti-Asian racism, that it is imperative that building solidarity is part of our organizing work, As the pandemic continues to have an impact on people of color and those with disabilities, it was always critical that we highlight organizers who are working underground, especially in these unprecedented times. So, the People's Collective for Justice and Liberation have been intentional in coordinating this conversation with organizers and leaders who will speak from their own experiences and lay the groundwork for a path towards liberation that centers those directly impacted. And as we come before you today, 1 year since our very first town hall, and nearly 2 weeks from a tragic anti-Asian racism, gender-based violence, and xenophobic violence on March 16th, we come before you today also knowing that the oppression against Asians and Asian Americans are not new. Because as long as white supremacy, cis, heteropatriarchy exists, all forms of oppression will exist. Once we get to the understanding that violence is entrenched from and with white supremacy, cis, heteropatriarchy, then we can understand that all forms of oppressions are connected. This means that we cannot just end anti-Asian racism without ending anti-Black racism, anti-indigeneity, classism, sexism, ableism, fat phobia, Islamophobia, homophobia, biphobia, transphobia, queer phobia, whorephobia, xenophobia, just to name a few. But we also know that as we importantly name these multiple forms of oppressions and the histories and the frameworks from which they stem, we also must name the resistance and the solidarity work that have always been here, from the Third World Liberation Front to the solidarity movements built amongst Filipino American and Mexican American farm workers, to the Rainbow Coalition, and so much more on-the-ground solidarity movement building work happening every day in our local communities everywhere that is often never seen in the news, not told in school books, because of the reality of false narratives and revisionist histories working to divide all of us. But for those that have known, for those of us that continue to do this work, and for this generation leading the way, and for the many new warriors coming into this work, we know that ending anti-Black racism is also the work to end anti-Asian racism. Solidarity movement building is ending anti-Asian racism. Abolition is ending anti-Asian racism. As our speakers will share with you today, gender-based violence is happening every day. As an organizer for now more than 25 years, I know that this work of transformation must also happen every day. The work I've got left to do to strengthen my own understandings of solidarity and what that actually looks like in practice, as I also work to dismantle this whole system. As an Asian American, as a Filipinx, to me, this means that if we believe in justice, if we believe in liberation, and if we believe in humanization, where we believe in transformative justice and non-carceral ways of being, where we see each other whole and live our values of abolition, then we must fight not just our own liberation, but for the liberation for all oppressed peoples. More than ever, this is the time where we must build together, build across, build solidarity. Abolitionists, Mariam Kaba, in their newest book, We Do This Till We Free Us, titled one of their chapters, Show Up and Don't Travel Alone. We need each other. We need each other. We need each other. As Linda Sarsour has said in one of our town halls this past year, solidarity is our survival. Thus, we must fight together for all of our freedoms. This is why we are still here.
First, Candy. First, Candy, it's been an honor and privilege to co-create, organize, and build since we have met, and especially this past year. I can honestly say I would not have made it without you, and I'm grateful the way you hold space and bring care for me, for us, and for our people. Thank you. In Assata Shakur's autobiography, she writes, Always decide who your enemies are for yourself, and never let your enemies choose your enemies for you. The enemy will have us thinking that Black, Indigenous, and other people of color are the enemies. The real enemy is white supremacy and cis heteropatriarchy and capitalism. The Atlanta shootings that took place was a stark reminder of the intersection of these violent systems and all that seek to perpetuate them. When Asian and Asian American women are targeted and killed in Atlanta, when Latinas, Latinos, and Latinxes are murdered at a Walmart in El Paso, Texas, when Black churchgoers are executed in Charleston, South Carolina at their place of worship, when Black and brown queers are shot at an LGBTQ2IA+ bar in Orlando, white supremacist vigilantes are not lone wolves or one-off. They are weaponizing the long-standing policies and practices of the US toward Black, Indigenous, Asian, and Latino Latinx bodies throughout its imperial history, which means this ongoing violence has everything to do with race, with gender, with class. And we are clear there are disproportionate impacts based on immigration status, sexual orientation, identity, expression, and ability and disability. Other forms of violence are at play and continue to impact the Asian American community. The conditions that require people to work at spas and massage parlors and restaurants and other jobs with low wages and no health care, no hazard pay, no paid sick days, or just hours and schedules is violence. To have to still go to work during a global pandemic, this violence is exacerbated. The reality is that in service or hospitality industries, which employ higher numbers of women of color and immigrant workers, are exploited, fetishized, and have the most sexual harassment claims. We will talk more about this today, but this also must include massage parlor and sex workers, period. A recent report by Stop AAPI Hate revealed that there were 3,800 incidents reported, with 68% coming from women. These numbers have not been updated since February 28th, and so I could only imagine the number of unreported cases because of fear they will be targeted or someone in their family will. The anti-Asian hate has seen a striking rise over the past year during the pandemic in light of the scapegoating and xenophobia from Donald Trump, other Republican electeds, and conservative pundits. While this is true, it is not new. Racism and white supremacy is part of the long-standing history and story of this country and the building of the systems that exist today. Some historic examples include the Page Act of 1875, which specifically targeted Asian women, the Chinese Exclusion Act, Japanese American internment, post 9/11 backlash on Muslim, Arab, and South Asian communities, which led to heightened surveillance and the creation of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, the Sikh temple shooting in Oak Creek, and the disproportionate impact on Southeast Asians in the school to prison to deportation pipeline. We also have to remember that Jim Crow segregation applied to the Chinese population as they were dehumanized as parasitic, soulless criminals, which I should note that Jim Crow and voter suppression law was passed in Georgia this week and signed by the Georgia governor, Brian Kemp, as a painting of a slave plantation was above him. Furthermore, the day before the Atlanta shootings, ICE deported 33 Vietnamese refugees despite a deportation moratorium. This quote from Adrienne Marie Brown has kept me grounded recently. Things are getting worse. Things are not getting worse. They are getting uncovered. We must hold each other tight and continue to pull back the veil. We at the People's Collective will continue to do our part to pull back the veil, provide political education, and opportunities like this town hall to hold critical and courageous conversations. It's not lost on me that even during Women's History Month, as Asians and Asian Americans, we feel and experience a deep mourning of the murders of women and women who are part of our community. Our pain, our rage, our resilience over the last year and the past few weeks will continue to lean on community-centered work and organizers who have modeled and forged radical healing and relationships in greater solidarity across race, gender, sexuality, ability, and citizenship status. In order to stop Asian hate in all of its forms, we must continue to organize, build solidarity, and practice transformative justice. That means getting involved with local grassroots organizations. That means building genuine and vulnerable relationships with Asian, Black, Indigenous, and Latina, O, and X communities. That means making sure that Black lives matter just as much as white ones do. It means defunding the police, abolishing ICE, providing reparations to those who were enslaved, and giving land back to Indigenous people and the traditional stewards of this land. That means for me, as a student of abolition and a practitioner of transformative justice, we must start with getting the police out of our own heads and finding ways to address harm and conflict that do not include or expand the police state, and that we must address all the trauma we are experiencing, including the experiences passed down from generations. I am unlearning as much as I am learning, and invite you all to be in a community of practice, a community of healing, and a community of radical joy and dance. We recognize we are in a long fight for justice and liberation, and today we will highlight the importance of an intersectional conversation that responds to violence within, against, and beyond our communities, and the grounded strategies we need in building solidarity despite these violent systems. To move the town hall forward, we would like to start with a land and indigenous acknowledgement from Mema Garvey and a Pacific blessing, Oli from Lealoha Kaula, who I call Kubule.
Mokuhonu is the Noa the people of Hawaii call these lands of North America. It is simply translated to Turtle Island, but the meaning in indigenous stories of these lands are so much more. The Lenape story about the great turtle is shared by the indigenous peoples of northeastern woodlands and carries throughout all of North America. Through these stories, we continue to learn about those who have stewarded these lands since time immemorial. We would also like to express our appreciation and respect of the indigenous people's inherent kindship beliefs when it comes to the land, especially since those beliefs were restricted for so long. As members of the BIPOC community, we know the importance of acknowledgement, and we encourage you to learn more about the lands we currently occupy by visiting native-land.ca. The United States was built on broken treaties. The lasting effects of federal and state policies, both past and present, have put Native Americans at a disadvantage for hundreds of years. It is on all of us, whether we are descendants of colonizers or inhabitants of stolen land, to re-educate ourselves and each other. Eola.
The Mainland Council of Association of Hawaiian Civic Clubs and Ka'alahui o Ole Kona Hawaiian Civic Club of Oregon and Southwest Washington strives to actively participate in the promotion, perpetuation, and practice of the Native Hawaiian culture and values. It is with this in mind that we practice lokahi, unity, as we stand in solidarity with Asians everywhere and take a position against the perpetuation of hate aimed at the Asian community. We want to recognize that within the US context of race, the Pacific Islander community is combined with the Asian American community. However, our experiences are varied, and in this moment, we want to center the voices of our Asian ohana, or family, who are hurting and need our support. We acknowledge that the AAPI designation continues to perpetuate a singular experience. Our ohana is large with a multitude of experiences. At this moment, our Asian ohana needs our support. We encourage the Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders at large and all communities to continue learning about the deeply rooted systemic racism within our society and actively work to dismantle it. There's a long-standing relationship between Native Hawaiians and Asian communities. We humbly support them as we continue to fight for safety, inclusivity, equity, and healing for all communities of color. On behalf of our organizations, we offer this oli or chant and blessing as we uplift the voices of our communities. Let's get to okay. What did I video? Nau makua mai ka la hiki a ka la kau, mai ka hōkui a ka hala vai. Nau makua ia ka hina kua ia ka hina alo, ia ka akau I ka lani. O ki ha I ka lani, o we I ka lani, nunulu I ka lani, ka holo I ka lani. E ia nā pula pula o ko o mauna wa kia. E malama o ko ia mako. E ulu I ka lani, e ulu I ka honua, e ulu I ka pai aina o Hawaii. E ho mai ka ike, e ho mai ka ikaika, e ho mai ki aka mai, e ho mai ka maupupono, e ho mai ka ike pāpālua, e ho mai ka mana. Nā o mākua mai ka lahi ki a ka la kau, mai ka hōkui a ka hala vai. Nā o mākua ia ka hina akua ia ka hinalo, ia ka akau I ka lani. O ki ha I ka lani, o we I ka lani, nunulu I ka lani, ka holo I ka lani. Eia nā pula pula o nā oiwi o ka honua. E malama o ko ia mako. E ulu I ka lani, e ulu I ka honua, e ulu I ka pai aina o Hawaii. E ho mai ka ike, e ho mai ka ikaika, e ho mai ki aka mai, e ho mai ka maupupono, e ho mai ka ike pāpālua, e ho mai ka mana. Nā o mākua mai ka lahi ki a ka la kau, mai ka hōkui a ka hala vai. Nā o mākua ia ka hina akua ia ka hina alo, ia ka akau I ka lani. O ki ha I ka lani, o we I ka lani, nunulu I ka lani, ka holo I ka lani. Eia nā pula pula o ka ohana ka ula. E malama o ko ia mako. E ulu I ka lani, e ulu I ka honua, e ulu I ka pai aina o Hawaii. E ho mai ka ike, e ho mai ka ikaika, e ho mai ki aka mai, e ho mai ka maupupono, e ho mai ka ike pāpālua, e ho mai ka mana. Ola. Mahalo.
Thank you for that. We would now like to introduce you to our ASL interpreters, captioner, graphics facilitator, note taker, and other tech support, including members of our People's Collective for Justice and Liberation Organizing Committee. For accessibility accommodations, our accessibility coordinators, Melissa Kelly Colibri, Liang Nagov, and ASL interpreters Gloshanda, Stephanie Chow, and Annie Dickman. Closed captions, Jesse Sapanta, and our graphic facilitator, Liz Nijaros. Next slide, please. For support, we have questions and chat monitors, Ana Lourdes Martinez, timekeeper, B. Ui Tiepo, live tweeting, Bobby Dalton Roy, video spotlight, Tavri Kuhn, note taker, Karen Bia, technology lead, Tavri Kuhn, slide deck, Andrew Hong, and our organizing committee, Tavri Kuhn, Karen Villa, Bobby Dalton Roy, B. Ui Tiepo, Andrew Hong, Sheng Xiao Soleil Yu, Michelle Ming, and Pebbles. Operations and administrative role, Ana Laura Martinez and Tavri Kuhn, fundraising, Bobby Dalton Roy and Jingshan Wang, research, Jude Paul Dizon, Karen Villa, digital and social media, Joyhana Yu Garza, and workshops, Andrew Hong and B. Ui Tiepo.
Before we begin the program, we want to introduce all of the speakers and panelists for the town hall in alphabetical order by last name. We will share a little bit of their bio, and their picture will be shown on the screen. Ashley Woodard Henderson is the first Black woman executive director of the Highlander Research and Education Center, a social justice leadership training school and cultural center founded in 1932. She's also a leader in multiple movement organizations and formations, including the Movement for Black Lives, National Bailout Collective, and Southern Movement Assembly. Ashley is a longtime activist working against environmental racism in Central and Southern Appalachia, and has fought for workers' rights, racial justice, women and LGBTQIA+ rights, reproductive justice, and intergenerational social movements across the South.
Dr. Akira Funahashi, or Akiko Love, OTD, OTRL, is a breathwork facilitator on the Breathwork for Recovery team, an occupational therapist, turntablist, and healer. Breathwork is instrumental in Akira's healing journey. Grateful for what breathwork provides her, Akira is inspired to share the power of breathwork with others who are open and ready to heal. As a transgender female, Akira has particular interest in helping others in the LGBTQ community, as well as individuals who struggle with childhood and sexual abuse trauma.
Edgar Fabian Frias is a non-binary queer, indigenous, and brown multidisciplinary artist, curator, educator, and psychotherapist. They work in photography, video art, sound, sculpture, printed textiles, gifts, performance, social practice, and community organizing, among other emergent genres. Frias is a 2022 candidate for an MFA in art practice at the University of California, Berkeley.
Jamila Aisha is founder and current executive director of WPN Power. WPNP is the 501c3 nonprofit organization of the WOW Group Sexual Empowerment Agency. WPN Power Co. was developed in 2014 after realizing there were limited BIPOC, non-rescue, non-religious organizations in the Atlanta area supporting sex workers or advocating for sex workers' rights. WPNP's primary platform is to provide support for sex industry workers who had been sexually assaulted while working.
J.M. Wang is a queer child of the Chinese diaspora living on Duwamish lands, Seattle, Turtle Island, via Malaysia, Singapore. The point is not to interpret and philosophize the world, but to act to change it. They are active in abolitionist, #FreeTheMall organizing, and Trans-Pacific Labor Solidarity organizing.
Kajua Raj was born in Laos and came to this country as a refugee child with her mother and siblings. She is the founder and co-executive director of Freedom Inc. In the past 20 years, Kajua has spent her life working to build collective power and social change within Southeast Asian and Black communities.
Kumulei Aloha Oke Anuenue Kaula is an inspiring educator, a motivating facilitator, a community leader, a kumu hula, a devoted daughter, a dedicated sister, and loving auntie. Ha, ahaha, ohana, and aloha are values that were instilled in her at a very young age. Lei Aloha was born on the island of Oahu to a family of cultural historians and entertainers, Growing up in a family with deep roots in the Hawaiian culture meant she embraced her home and used that guidance to pave the journey she lives every day.
Lydia X.Z. Brown is an advocate, organizer, educator, attorney, strategist, and writer whose work has focused on interpersonal and state violence against disabled people living at the intersections of race, class, sexuality, nation, and language. They founded the Fund for Community Reparations for Autistic People of Color's Interdependence, Survival, and Empowerment, and are currently creating their own tarot deck, Disability Justice Wisdom Tarot.
Meima Garvey is a first-generation Japanese from the province of Osaka, Japan. Rooted in her Japanese culture, Meima's mom, Mamiko Garvey, continues to raise them in the values and respect that was instilled in her. At a very young age, Meima found her love of hula while visiting the islands of Hawaii with her maternal grandparents. Through her upbringing and hula teachings, Meima knows who she is and what she stands for.
Rosa Alicia Clemente is an organizer, political commentator, and independent journalist. An Afro-Puerto Rican born and raised in the Bronx, New York, she has dedicated her life to organizing, scholarship, and activism. From Cornell to prisons, Rosa is one of her generation's leading scholars on the issues of Afro-Latinx identity. Rosa is the president and founder of Know Thyself Productions, which has produced 7 major community activism tours and consults on issues such as hip hop feminism, media justice, voter engagement among youth of color, third-party politics, United States political prisoners, and the right of Puerto Rico to become an independent nation free of United States colonial domination.
Soraya Sharker is a community organizer with the National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum. She organizes aunties, moms, new immigrants, and working class AAPI folks. Her goal is to make NAPAW, organizing, and activism accessible to everyone by centering the most marginalized.
Thank you so much, everyone. I would love to invite us all to turn our awareness from this gorgeous virtual landscape that we're all inhabiting here and move it towards ourselves. We will be taking several moments throughout today's event to pause and to care for ourselves. It is crucial to integrate self-care and to take mindful pauses as we do this important work. Get comfortable, close your eyes, or find a place to focus your awareness on. And start by noticing the gentleness of your breath, giving yourself permission to take a deep inhale. Now I'm going to count to 3, and I would love to invite us all to take a deep breath together and really connect our bodies here in the virtual space. 1, 2, 3. Now we're going to do that one more time. 1, 2, 3. Okay. One last time. 1, 2, 3. Here, we can make contact with our bodies, these sacred vessels that hold us, our containers, ones that allow us to experience the infinite. Just be here with your body and whatever capacity you may be able to. Let yourself be gentle, be open, be curious. Greet whatever it is that you notice with love and with compassion. I want to take a moment to acknowledge that we have been through a lot and that our nervous systems have been activated. We've been feeling sadness, anger, rage, fear, desperation. And we have also been feeling strength, power, creativity, hope, togetherness. Take another deep breath here as we allow ourselves to make contact with the multiplicities of this moment. As we take another deep breath, I want us to imagine ourselves moving all of our energy down our bodies into the sacred, rich, dark soil of the earth, allowing us to make contact with the earth beneath us. In this moment, the earth joins us together. Let yourself feel that divine connection to the land. Take a moment and name the ancestors of the land. Name the ancestors that may be present here in space. I am on the unceded territory of the Ohlone people, also known as the Bay Area. I am with my Birarika ancestors, my queer, trans, two-spirit, and gender expansive ancestors. Greet any ancestors who show up with love and let them know that you are present. Let's invite them here into this space. We honor the land, we honor the body, we honor the ancestors of this space. May they bless us, may they hold us, may they share their love with us as we share our love with them. I'm going to count to 3 and invite us all again together to take one last deep as a way to close this moment of mindfulness. 1, 2, 3. Thank you again. It has been an honor to be here in this space with you.
Thank you so much, Edgar. We will be offering mindful pauses throughout the town hall to support each other's processing. Based on the RSVPs and interests from across the country and globe, this shows us how critical this conversation is, especially for this moment we are in. While we don't have enough time to do introductions of everyone who's joined in, we wanted to do a quick poll to get a sense of where people are watching the town hall. Also, please feel free to drop in the chat or the comments below. And if you are watching the Facebook, to also share. And you could also do that on Twitch or Twitter stream where we're all streaming from. Please share your name, pronouns, and where you're watching this town hall from. This leads us to our poll. Where are you watching the town hall from? And I see that you're all going simultaneously. We understand that borders are not the way we honor Indigenous lands. If you're from the West, Midwest, Northeast, South, Alaska, Hawaii, Samoa, Guam, or the Northern Mariana Islands, Puerto Rico, or US Virgin Islands, or outside of the US. And let's give it a moment. Okay. While our folks are responding to the poll, we're going to take a pause for our tech and accessibility cruise for about 5 minutes. Feel free to take this time away from the screen, stretch, or anything you need to do. And we'll play an instrumental song for this pause and be back with the results of our poll.
Awesome. Welcome back, folks. We're going to end the poll now and share the results. Many folks on the West Coast, we have representation from the Northeast, Midwest, the South, Hawaii, and we got comrades with us from across the globe as well. So thank you so much for joining us. And we can go ahead and turn off the slide deck now. I'd like to introduce you to the opening speaker for the town hall, my comrade, longtime organizer, member of the People's Collective for Justice and Liberation Advisory Council, and someone who I will follow to the moon and back or wherever they may take me. Please, let's give a warm welcome to Kajiwa.
Hello, hello, hello. Heavy topic, but I'm glad to see all of you on this beautiful Saturday afternoon. I'm going to speak slowly so our interpreters can get it all in, and drop some knowledge for myself and for everyone else here. Last year, right around this time, after racist Trump labeled COVID-19 the Chinese virus, instantly we saw a rise in anti-Asian racist violence and hate. While some in our communities were cautious in calling out Trump's white supremacist terroristic hate against Asian Americans, many of us knew better. After more than 550,000 COVID deaths and the failure of this government to address this pandemic on every level, Asian Americans and people of color in this country and the world are now just starting to comprehend the devastation and impact of COVID and white supremacist violence on our communities. In 2020, over 3,600 anti-Asian hate incidences were reported. Of that, 2/3 were from Asian women. We are not surprised. The dehumanization and disregard for Asian Americans and immigrants have only worsened during the pandemic. Anti-Asian hate is not new to this country, not on this land and not across Asia. The killing of Asian women and children at the hands of white men isn't new to Asian women and our communities. While white supremacist sexual predators continue to cause harm to Asian children, women, and queer folks throughout the world, from sexual exploitation of children, queer folks, and women in Southeast Asia, the Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, to the US military camps in South Korea, to the attempted massacre of Southeast Asian children in 1989 in Stockton, California, which 5 Southeast Asian children were killed, to the mass shooting at the Sikh temple in Oak Creek, Wisconsin in 2012, to now the mass shooting of Asian women workers in Georgia. We continue to endure at the hands of white men and their racist gender-based violence. Murderer Robert Aaron Long, just like the shooter in Stockton, California, like the shooter at the Sikh temple in Wisconsin, these white supremacist murderers intentionally planned and targeted these locations because they wanted to inflict specific harms against Asian women, children, and people. We know the killings of Asian women in Atlanta earlier this month is the kind of targeted violence fueled by racialized sexualization of Asian people. Stereotypes of Asian women as disposable have allowed white men to exploit, traffic, rape, and murder us without accountability in both domestic and foreign spaces. Racism, misogyny, and anti-immigration policies uphold these inequity and violence. We know that violent white capitalism does not respect our lives or our bodies, and we condemn anyone that refuses to acknowledge the racist, misogynistic motivations behind these murders. We understand that this kind of violence shares a deep root of anti-Black racism, the raping of this land and disregard for Native people and the genocide of Native people in this land, the xenophobia in this country, the turning and the camps of children in the South borders, the same violent dehumanization that has allowed white men to kill Black and brown people at will is at work in these tragedies, specifically to what happened in Atlanta. This single act of hatred follows a long history of white supremacy, militarism, imperialism in the sexualized violence against Asian people. We know that gender-based violence against Asian women, queer, trans, intersect, and children is anti-Asian hate. This is the type of hate that is in its worst form. Gender-based violence is a tool of cis patriarchal white supremacist violence, whether it be done through by white men or with men in our own community. From the killings of 500 children, elders in Vietnam, the My Lai village, if you don't know, there's this really popular, famous photo of this elderly woman being held back by another young woman while her daughter's in the back buttoning up her shirt, carrying a child in one hand. It's said that she, the young woman with the child and her shirt unbuttoned, was made to take off her shirt and get naked in front of these US military soldiers seconds before her mother and her whole village would be massacred. We also know that the sexual violence in these camp towns in South Korea, in these military bases, these women are exploited and also have endured many sexual violence that has gone unreported. In addition to that, there's exploitation of children and girls in the tourist industry that a lot of white men from America go to our countries to enact those violence against our children. We are not your fetish. We are not docile. We are not silent. We are not victims who you can kill at will. As Asian women in this country, we also know that anti-Asian hate is more than just surviving the communal trauma of what happened to in Atlanta to those 6 Asian women. It is also surviving and witnessing the deportation of 33 Vietnamese Americans who came to this country as refugee children. On that Monday, the same week of the killing in Atlanta. In addition to that, days after that, 4 Southeast Asian women were murdered by their ex-spouses or their partners. We also understand that it is also anti-Asian hate is also watching our elders get targeted. It is also being hunted by white hunters in northern Wisconsin. It is not allowing, it is also, anti-Asian hate is also not allowing workers to leave because they're afraid of getting COVID and them getting fired after they've been called the Chinese virus. Anti-Asian hate is also not having access to healthcare, not having access to housing, and not having access to food. More importantly, if you are upset and devastated by the killings of these 6 Asian women in Atlanta, I'm also calling upon you and our communities to be equally passionate about these other forms of violence in our communities. I say this to say, as an Asian person, I would likely die by the hands of white supremacist killers. And as an Asian woman, I could likely die by the hands of loved ones through femicide also. Therefore, we must expand our comprehension of what anti-Asian hate is to include not just what the media wants us to show us, but what our communities are really experiencing. We must protect Asian people against hate from white supremacists and anyone who wants to cause harm to us. But also we must protect our women and children from those in our communities who are killing and harming our own through domestic violence, sexual assault, domestic homicides. It is not enough to see anti-Asian hate through the lens of and the narrative of cis hetero white supremacists. And it is not enough to see it through cis hetero Asian narratives. We must follow those who are most impacted and uplift those voices. Because one of the biggest lessons we've learned from the pandemic and surviving the pandemic is that we are all in the same storm, but we're not in the same boat. And so with that, I thank you all for listening and welcome to the event.
Wow. Thank you so much, Kajua, for the powerful opening and to ground us in today's discussion. Next, y'all, we are going to move into our panel conversation. I will be asking our panelists different questions, and we're going to start off our first question with Soraya from Napof, Georgia. So I'd like to welcome Soraya. So, hello. So Soraya, our first question is for you. Can you share what has the approach and response of Georgia been on the ground for Asian women, femmes, and trans folks, and what kind of support is still needed?
Yeah, that's wonderful. Also, just to begin with, I'm just going to give a little descriptor of who I am for accessibility needs. I have brown hair. I am of South Asian descent. I have really big glasses, and I'm wearing a striped shirt. There has been lots of different forms of responses in Georgia. So there are like service organizations that are directly providing services to community members that were impacted, such as the families of the victims. There are also advocacy and activist organizations and like organizing base building organizations like NAPOP that are working on like long-term policy changes that we want to see in Georgia and in the United States so that we can ensure that this does not happen in the future, and so that we can ensure that this is not just a short-term like news cycle issue. This is something that we can continue working on the long term. So for just I'm going to speak from my experience with with NAPOF and the work that we've done. So first and foremost, we have two petitions. One that is Georgia specific to the governor of Georgia, Governor Kemp, that is calling him out and asking him to denounce anti-API racism. The second petition is a federal petition that all of us can sign that's on this call. What it's saying is first, we want to acknowledge the intersecting identities of those targeted by the white supremacist, that they are not only Asian, they're women, they are also people that are working class and not protected by the state, whether that is like having access to proper wages or being protected in general. Also, we want to, in the petition, we also acknowledge that we do not need more policing. Policing is very harmful for our community, and we do not want that. So you can find the petition at NAPOF_ATL, which is our Instagram/Facebook page, or at napof.org. Next up, we also organize some spaces to process. And this is largely because there's been so much trauma that our communities have experienced through this that we really wanted to bring together like AAPI women, trans folks, gender nonconforming folks, and femmes to give them some space to like process what's happening, be angry, to grieve, to be upset. And that occurred last week. We also hosted a vigil where we really wanted to create a space for community healing, where we had healers, artists, community members and storytellers, faith leaders come and share their experiences. We're also supporting and with rallies by offering rides to community members that all over Georgia. And lastly, this is the most important point, we want to have like long-term policy change, and that's what we're working on with our community members as a collective. And when I say long-term policy change, we want to see structural change. We don't want this to just be something that the news cycle is very excited about, something that we see on the news every day, but then it comes to an end after the news cycle moves on. We also want to memorialize the victims of the shooting. Lastly, to kind of talk about like what support is still needed, we really appreciate like the support and the onpouring of support that has come in with donations and other things, as well as just like the actions and the emails and everything, the love that we're getting. We appreciate that. But we also would encourage people to get involved with their community organizations in their own local communities, the collectives, the organizations, the activist groups, so that we can sustain long-term change. It is all about building power and base building. We want to ensure that we can make real change.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarai. I really appreciate it. I would also at this moment invite the other panelists to join by video. I'm going to be asking different questions in different orders so that we can hear from the panelists. And then I also just wanted to ask, and for folks who are going to maybe share a previous experience or whatnot, to also do a content warning for folks, especially if it may bring up other previous experiences for folks who are tuning into the town hall. So our next question I'm going to ask to Lydia. So Lydia, what are your main concerns for disability justice in the way that the media, law enforcement, and the public response to anti-Asian hate, racism, and the tragedy in Atlanta in particular?
This is Lydia. I'm a youngish East Asian person with short black hair and glasses, wearing a blue shirt and sweater. I've got a plant behind me and 2 windows with blinds, sign name L. Brown. When I think about disability justice, I think about the necessity, the urgency, and the vitality of anti-ableist analysis and understanding and responding to all of the harms of interpersonal and state violence, of white supremacy, of settler colonialism, of patriarchal, cisgender, heterosexual-based violence. And I'm not going to speak in detail, but I will be speaking a little bit about sexual violence in the next minute, just as a heads up. I think about the ways in which ableism is weaponized both against our communities and by people who claim to be advocating within our communities. The ways in which ableism enables the invisibilization of white supremacist violence, of those who commit awful crimes of violence, acts of violence. I don't like the word crime. I didn't mean to use that word. Who commit acts of violence against marginalized communities to say, well, these people weren't racist, or they weren't anti-queer, they weren't misogynistic, they must have been crazy. Only someone who was truly crazy or out of their mind, had serious mental health issues, could have carried out an act like this. And, that ableism both ends up harming Black, Brown, Asian, and Native disabled people the most, and it renders invisible the mechanics of how white supremacy and misogyny operate. The rhetoric coming out from the police, which are an institution that never makes us safe, that does not make our communities safe, that this was someone having a bad day who had a sex addiction, literally serves to render invisible the constant violence that sex workers, especially sex workers of color, many of whom are also disabled, experience. Serves to render invisible the ways in which sexualization has always been wielded as a weapon of violence, targeting East and Southeast Asian people and people of color from all communities, Black, Brown, and Indigenous, as existing only to be exploited by and fetishized by white people, and at the same time positioned as a menace and a threat to white people's sexuality and specifically to white women's innocence. The ways in which people want to talk about this being a mental health issue instead of a race issue literally serve to uphold ableism and white supremacy. And ableism and white supremacy operate in tandem. You cannot have one without the other. Ableism undergirds white supremacy, and white supremacy depends upon ableism, and ableism depends upon settler colonialism and racism in order to exist. Ableism and white supremacy operate by defining negatively racialized people as necessarily inferior to white people, as existing only to be exploited and extracted from, or else to be disappeared, to be controlled, contained, managed, or prevented even from coming into existence again. So when you ask, how does disability justice inform my approach to this? I think both in terms of how we understand the violence against negatively racialized people historically and currently in this country, the rhetoric surrounding that violence, and the ways in which our communities have to mobilize to respond to it. My work in disability justice is rooted in a commitment to abolition, is rooted in a commitment to transformative justice praxis. And so when I think about disability justice, I am also thinking about what it means for our communities to center and to value our own healing and our own liberation. Because if we don't account for and attend to the centrality of disability and ableism in our lives and our communities, we are never going to be able to dismantle white supremacy. We are never going to be able to end sexual violence or rape culture, and we are never going to be able to end settler colonialism.
Wow, thank you, Lydia. Seeing lots of affirmations for what you're sharing. Thank you. Our next question is going to be for Rosa. Can you share with us why you feel racial solidarity is critical to dismantling white supremacy and cis heteropatriarchy?
Sorry. First and foremost, thank you all for having me. Thank you, Candy. I mean, we go back for like almost 3 decades, and it's like we still keep fighting the fight. Thank you, Gregory, and thank you to everyone who's tuned in. It's been really great to learn so much from so many dope young folks today. I've been listening for a while. You know, like, this is where we're at right now. Like, whiteness is the public health emergency in this country. And until we start treating it like that, until we stop reacting to what they are doing, and until we just admit to ourselves that at this current historical moment in this country, that the electro-political project is dead. It was on its way to death, but yesterday by Governor Kemp, being surrounded by 6 white men to sign a law to limit voting accessibility, right? It's like all these particularly white men or white people who feed on whiteness and do so in violent ways, whether they're collectively doing it together or individually. You know, these dragons are like fighting to live because they're old and decrepit and their time is up. And the more they realize, the more the attacks are going to continue. And I think it is super instructive for those of us that are not AAPI people to understand that the reason this also happened in Georgia is because Georgia in the past election set the ground for what multiracial voting can do, right? And that people down there and everywhere in this country are very smart. Folks like us who don't believe in a 2-party system, but yet that's where we turn, right? So we want to see reform or well, most people, not us, see reform or policies or agendas. Like, we don't need that anymore. We know everything we want. There's 100 million agendas, 100 million public policy reform bills. It's all out there. But now we just have to come to the conclusion that as this country is going to a majority people of color, ruled by a minority elite that also excludes white people, our job right now is how are we going to build self-determination in the essence of what does cooperative economics look like? What does mutual aid look like? What does self-defense look like? Right? And what I have learned in these last couple of weeks and reading so many stories is that the AAPI community has been doing this for over a year, or particularly with their elders, right? And saying, no, we've been doing the work. But, well, and not a but that unless we come to this conclusion very quickly that not only is whiteness the public health crisis in this country, that if we keep depending on people who are elected to do the right thing, it's not necessarily that they don't want to do the right thing, is that the duopoly is so corrupt and it's so poisoned that those elected officials that would want to do the right thing will not be allowed, will be primary, will be chased out, have to deal with death threats and all of this kind of stuff. So when that law got signed yesterday, it's completely reminiscent of what happened in 1865 and the post-Reconstruction era in this country, where there were African-American people being elected into office. And then what had to happen? The backlash to Reconstruction, the backlash to Black people, particularly men, having the right to vote, the backlash of creating purposeful communities because those African descendants of enslaved people knew they could only depend on themselves. And even when they did that, they were burnt, they were bombed, and all of this kind of stuff. So for me, I really want folks to, we have to move and make some decisions, because all of us can't do everything. Right. And we have to have a time now where we also look at each other, not as some allies or accomplices, but really as people who are fighting for humanity. We're fighting for human rights at this point. And unless we have that harder conversation about what does it look like not to always react? What does mobilization look like outside of social media? Why do we keep depending on old white men to be presidents to do the right thing? You know, it's a lot of work. So I'll end with what Frantz Fanon, I think everybody should know who Frantz Fanon was. And Frantz Fanon talks about colonized lands. And with that, I say colonized minds. That a lot of our work is also like politically and awakening people's political consciousness and racial consciousness, but to also that the internal revolution has to be done before you get into this work, because then you won't understand what your political ideology is. And that's what white supremacy likes to do. It likes to divide and conquer. You know, we've seen stories, particularly like, oh, the African-American community and the Korean-American community don't get along. I'm like, maybe, yes, in the past, and why? You know, like, why did Rodney King Rebellion happen? Why did this happen on the other side of the country? And I'm seeing mainstream media now begin to push this narrative around how particularly Black people are anti-Asian and anti-Asian people and Asian people are anti-Black, as opposed to being like, again, white supremacy, whiteness is the problem, not us as a people.
Thank you, Rosa. Really appreciate that. And I think what also resonated for me was kind of this importance about the work also starts within, right? Both in terms of our political education, but also how are we also like dismantling the systems that we have been socialized in as well. So thank you so much for sharing that. The next question that I want to pose to is JM. As we know, the shootings in Atlanta happened at 3 different massage parlors. Can you share what aspects of working in massage parlors challenge what we normally think about workplace safety?
Yeah, just for some self-description, accessibility. I'm a Chinese East Asian femme and I'm wearing a beanie. Hi, everyone. To respond to your question, Greg, so the shooter targeted the massage parlors because he wanted to eliminate a sexual temptation. I mean, there's so many layers to this and we're exploring that. But even though massage parlors are associated with sex work and we are coming from a pro-sex workplace, this is not always true, right? We know massage parlors are a gendered form of care labor with a spectrum of services that are offered from massagers to sex workers. So for us, we believe in the autonomy of immigrant Asian women who work within the constraints of choices available to them in white supremacist America. When we reframe the conversation about massage parlors into one of workplace safety and well-being, we acknowledge the racialized, gendered, class exploitation that all workers encounter, and especially massage parlor workers. And we offer support ranging from ergonomics advice, vaccine access, to community safety when folks are harassed by customers or cops, to condoms and sexual health. It expands the way we relate to massage parlor workers and we center their health, autonomy, and well-being, and address the conditions that make them vulnerable, rather than the patriarchal assumptions and judgments from within our communities too, about what kind of work women should or should not be doing. We put into practice talking about workplace health and safety in a way that doesn't detach our physical bodies from our social, emotional well-being and the social conditions in which work takes place. Like this reframe is also leads to really deeply relational organizing rather than this bureaucratic top-down, ways of talking about workplace health. And it's also not savior politics, which is this narrative that white men or the state will rescue these oppressed poor Asian women.
Thank you, JM, and thank you for the work that you are leading and doing too, as well with the Massage Parlor Outreach Project. So our next question is going to be for Jamila. So we understand that you are one of the organizers for Vigil in Solidarity and in support of folks that were impacted by the anti-Asian violence. How else are you involved in supporting folks in Atlanta? And I think one question that we also want folks to know and hear about is, what does sex worker solidarity look like?
Hi, thank you for having me, and I will also describe myself. I'm a light brown skinned Afro-American with kinky bangs and pony, and I have on white rimmed glasses. So one of the things that was very important to me after the shootings happened was giving people a space to air their grievances, to talk about their fear and their anger behind what happened. And that kind of rolled into the visual itself and the march itself, going down to those spaces and honoring those individuals. I did not want to give any energy to the person who committed the crime, but I definitely wanted to honor those people who whose lives were lost. So that was very important to me. I am currently working on some ongoing programs to help the individuals in the sex trade industry here feel safe, including the bad date report and alert that goes out. If something happens, we can immediately let people know that to look out for these types of individuals or that individual. I have a I Survive group support meeting for those who specifically have been sexually assaulted while working, but also those who've experienced brutal attacks while working, just to give them a safe space to talk about what happened to them and to give them the opportunity to network with other people who understand what they are going through. And so for me, solidarity looks exactly like this, as it has been mentioned many times before, organizing together with people with aligned visions, intersecting visions. Our issues are not going to look the same, but as it's been said, that we ourselves are not the enemy. We need to look at who is actually causing this division and causing this derision, and demand that our voices be heard, and demand our safety, demand our human rights and our civic rights.
Thank you so much for your solidarity, Jamila, and for holding space for folks and helping hold space for folks in Atlanta. This is a prime example of how solidarity is happening, has continued, and will continue to happen. So y'all, I've been told that we're running out of time, but I would still love to ask folks kind of another round of questions. But we are hoping that maybe if you could just shorten this answer a little bit so that we can have time for a pause, and then our closing speaker and the announcements. So we'll do another round of questions, but again, if we can keep the responses to a minute or 2 minutes this time, that would be greatly appreciated. So we're going to go back to you, Soraya, and ask, what are some of the kinships or partnerships that are being forged in the Asian community in Georgia that reflect the radical possibility for collective freedom?
Yes, that's a wonderful question. Thank you so much. I'm going to talk a little faster just so I can get through. So First and foremost, I think Georgia has a huge, long history of collective freedom and collective liberation work. Even like just in the recent years, with like the fight against the abortion ban, HB 481, which was led largely by women of color in Georgia. Also, the election cycle in Georgia in 2018, 2020, and 2021, which Rosa already mentioned, as well as the work around the ICE, Irwin County ICE Detention Center, which was led by Latinx community members, but also had AAPI, Black, and other organization support. I think Georgia and I think the United States, and particularly the South, has a long history of collective liberation and working together. And I really truly see this in the reproductive justice movement. So NAPOP really centers reproductive justice in all of our work. Reproductive justice is the right to have children, the right to have children, the right not to have children, the right to raise your children in a safe and sustainable environment, and the right to bodily autonomy. We cannot have reproductive justice if we have hyper-policing. We cannot have reproductive justice if people are afraid of their immigration status. We cannot have reproductive justice if people do not have access to healthcare. We cannot have reproductive justice if people are in constant fear of deportation. So within that framework, we think that we see that the need for collective liberation, but I also want to talk about the importance of collective liberation within our own organizing in the AAPI community. I think a lot of times in the AAPI community, those that are centered are usually like second gen English speaking young professionals that are in the spaces, but we have to really think deeply about who we're bringing to the table. Do we have aunties here? Do we have grandmas? Are we bringing working class folks? Are we bringing people that are non-English speakers, and are we making our spaces accessible to those community members? If we can make our spaces accessible, then we can truly have collective liberation. Thank you.
Thanks, Soraya. Appreciate it. Yeah, and we are all we got. We got, again, the importance of continuing to build solidarity. So we're going to go to back to you, Lydia, now. Our next question is, how does the narrative of so-called hate crimes take away from the structures of white supremacy responsible for the violence aimed at Asian Americans, Black, Indigenous, and Latinx folks?
This is Lydia. I took a pause for the interpreters so they would have a moment to breathe. Gave them another moment. I recognize we've all been talking a lot. I don't use the word crime often. I try not to. I don't like that language because when we talk about hate crimes, number one, we are legitimizing the state's role and gatekeeping role in defining what acts ought to be permissible or ethical or not in society, rather than challenging and undermining the carceral state in its obsession with criminalizing and incarcerating our people and disappearing our peoples and our communities. Number two, I don't use phrases like hate crime because it individualizes oppression in the same way that I don't like to talk about bias or prejudice that much. And to be clear, it's not that I think those words have no utility, especially in very specific contexts, but in general, in my political work, I don't use those words because they individualize oppression and make it about individual people having problems, individual people having prejudice, individual people hating a group. And in reality, what we're talking about are whole systems, structures, and processes of violence, histories and ongoing legacies of white supremacy, of imperialism, of settler colonialism, whole ongoing legacies of incarceration and institutionalization. And it's even the same reason, right, why I mentioned it a few minutes ago, just in a call in to all of us as we're talking, that I don't use the language of health or disability or disease when we're talking about structures of oppression either, because that also serves to invisibilize how oppression works while erasing and harming disabled, multiply marginalized people. And disabled people are more likely to be sex workers, are more likely to be undocumented, are more likely to have been affected by war, famine, militarization, because white supremacy and colonialism and war and occupation literally create and exacerbate disability. And so when I think about the language that we use, right, it's not just what words are they, but it's what values are we espousing? What analysis are we using to inform the work that we do, as well as our political demands and our political visioning for what the future and what liberation will be.
Thank you, Lydia. Appreciate that. I'm going to switch up the order a little bit. I'm going to go back to Jamila and then JM, and then we're going to go with Rosa, just to give you all a heads up. So Jamila, the next question I have for you is, how do care, emotion, and sex-centered liberation provide important contributions to movements for justice against violence and harm?
So I believe that sexual empowerment speaks directly to not only our emotional intelligence, but also our self-empowerment and self-love and our confidence. We can't talk about the backlash of sexual assault and sexual violence without first talking about emotional intelligence and comprehensive sex education and empowerment. I think these things will aid in the prevention. And I'm a strong believer in that. We have to start with learning about ourselves and our self-confidence. I think that this is that contribution to justice, learning about those things.
Awesome. Thank you, Jamila.
Mm-hmm.
So the next question is going to be for you, JM. So what aspects of race, gender, sexuality, and or citizenship do we need to consider for social justice work to be truly intersectional with the aims of massage parlor workers?
Yeah, so a few words. So MPOP, that's Massage Parlor Outreach Project, we're named after Hot Pot, which is it's a big part of, organizing culture in China. So we primarily reach out to Asian immigrant workers, women who work in Seattle's Chinatown International District massage parlors, and majority of them are immigrant Chinese women. And in our conversations with massage parlor workers, we learned that many of them fear police raids that further criminalize and isolate workers. This has been happening for a long time before this incident. Many are afraid of deportation, of ICE, and many are also women who are supporting families back home. And what this means for us in MPOP is that it's really important to name the gender division, right? A lot of people talk about successful Chinese immigrants coming to the US, but we want to say that behind every successful Chinese immigrant techie who works at Microsoft or Amazon in Seattle is a string of women who do low wage, gendered labor, caring labor, who service them, who are not being acknowledged or seen, right? We also want to call for the end of deportation and police violence. These raids that have been happening for a long time under this rescue narrative make workers unsafe and vulnerable. So we have to name the state violence that's been complicit in this recent massacre. We want to resist the model minority myth and the monopoly of Asian identity by a certain class of East Asian people, and recognize the class, gender, and racial dynamics even amongst East Asian communities. We call for decriminalizing sex work. Everyone should have the freedom to work without fear of state violence. And again, we want to fight this white supremacist and class exploitation that is so characteristic of American society in all its manifestations, because this is what makes immigrant Asian women workers, massage parlor workers, so vulnerable.
Thank you, JM. And I think that was important to kind of also speak. I'll pause for a moment. Yes, so thank you, JM. I think it was important to really provide that additional context of the shootings in Atlanta, both in terms of the particular folks who are impacted and murdered, and the larger systems that we are trying to dismantle. So we're gonna close out this panel with our final question for Rosa. So how would you compare the context of state violence that the Black Panther movement responded to with today's organizing and cross-racial solidarity work? And is there anything that you would offer to folks who are organizing in this moment that we should take with us as we continue to work to dismantle these systems of oppression.
Yeah, so again, thank you for having me, and for being able to listen to just all these brilliant minds, and question and push myself to do better in a lot of areas. I don't like when we compare current movements to past movements in this way. Not how you broke it down, Gregory, but in this way. The Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, the Young Lords, the Red Guard, the Brown Berets, all these radical organizations that started in 1966, and by 1976, either the leaders had gone underground, had gotten political asylum in other countries, obviously were assassinated, or like we still have at this moment, political prisoners like Sundiata Acoli, Leonard Peltier, Mumia Abu-Jamal, David Gilbert, and the list goes on. And I don't like that comparison, because those young people really did do the work within a socialist context. There was never going to be a good type of capitalism. I think a lot of current movements think that, oh, well, we can have Black capitalism and then the Black community is good, and we can have Latino capitalism, then the Latino community is good. And that these organizations were very clear that they did have, and they were armed, that they did read about revolutionary violence, and even to have that conversation in this current time is real tricky, right? But what I'm saying is ultimately these organizations were about self-determination. And while all the brilliant minds and all the work we're doing comes together, unless we're building institution or purposeful communities that we want to be a part of, we will stay in this cycle of state violence that is being meted out a little at a time, and then killing younger organizers in terms of straight killing by the state, or the amount of mental and physical trauma. Because and that would be my last thing for, especially, look, I'm about to be 50, y'all, and I'll tell you this, I thought up until 5 years ago that I was physically fit. And these last 5 years, everything started breaking down. And that is about age, but it is about being in the movement for 30 years, right? And what I always offer to young folks is, do not emulate that. Do not be a martyr. Understand when it's time to take a break. And the only way you could really do that is if you also are clear that you have comrades, right? That are nothing, the revolution's not going to happen if you have to take moments to deal with mental or physical health. So, that's what I would say.
Thank you, Rosa. And thank you to Soraya, Lydia, JM, Jamila, and the panel. It's not lost on me that as I look to you all, the folks who are leading, are leading response on the ground, leading our movement, that it's women, femmes, queer and non-binary folks. And so I just want to say, I see you, I appreciate you. I have so much love for you, and I feel grateful to be in community with folks, and that you all are able to still organize, bring care for folks, even in the midst of grieving and dealing with and processing the trauma that we have as well. So thank you so much for taking time with it to be with us on the town hall. And with that being said, we're going to end off the panel, and I'm going to pass it back to my comrade, Dr. DJ Cuttin Candy.
Wow, thank you so much for such a powerful panel. Thank you, Greg, for moderating, and gratitude for all of our panelists, Soraya, Lydia, Rosa, JM, and Jamila, for such an important conversation and how your work connects to anti-Asian violence, intersectionality, and cross-racial solidarity. So especially in leaving off on really caring for ourselves, and which is a good reminder. For now, we'll transition to another mindful pause, which we've been doing since we started with our People Collective for Justice and Liberation Collective Circle facilitator, B. Uteyefo. Go ahead.
Thank you, Candy. Hello, this is B. Uitiapo. I'm a Chinese Filipinx queer cis woman. My hair is straight and dark brown. and my hair is parted in the middle. I'm wearing a plum floral V-neck top, and I have earbuds in my ears. And I'm seated in front of a door open to mountains. And there are hula hoops behind me. I'm a member of the organizing committee for the People's Collective for Justice and Liberation. And I'm one of the Collective Circle facilitators. So thank you for showing up for yourself, for each other, and for our community, seeking to build solidarity that we're continually building for the greater collective. For this mindful pause, you're invited to focus very simply on 3 things: softness, pause, and breath. You're invited to stay with us here to focus on these 3 things, or you can take a pause from the screen for several minutes and take these words with you. Softness, pause, and breath. Without judgment or outward action, just bringing the next several minutes to the awareness of where we need to be soft with ourselves, where we need to pause, and where we need breath. We've been listening to a lot of information and stories. As movement people, we know how to go hard and rush and do amazing things. In order to be sustainable, in order to stay with each other for the long haul, as Rosa Clemente reminded us, we want to last 30 years. So yes, there is time to go with our fire and go hard in order to be resilient together. We also need our softness, pause, and our breath for ourselves and for each other. Where can we be soft? Pause. And bring breath. If it feels good to write, doodle, or daydream, all of these things are welcome. And bringing into the next several moments, we don't have to go, go, go in this moment. We can just be together and feel the power of the hundreds, thousands of beings that are with us in this moment. Softness, pause, and breath. Thank you for being in this mindful pause together. As the Black Lives Matter Manifesto says, we got us, we all we need. I encourage you to take these words with you into the wordless pause and hope to see you at a collective circle. Thank you.
Thank you, B, for that mindful pause. We're going to move into another musical pause. And while we do so, we'll start the pause with our second poll. We want to know more about you who are in solidarity with us. What is your race? You can select more than one if it applies, and drop down in the comments if you're watching from Facebook, Twitch, or Twitter. And we'll start the poll. Asian American or Alaska Native, Asian, Southeast Asian, East Asian, Black, or African American, Latinx, Latino, or Hispanic, Middle Eastern or North African, Native Hawaiian, or Pacific Islander or white. While folks are responding to the poll, we're going to take another pause for our tech and accessibility crews for a couple of minutes. Feel free to take this time away from the screen, stretch, or anything you need to do. We'll play an instrumental song for this pause and be back with the results of our poll. You also don't want to miss our closing speaker, my very good friends, Ashley Woodard Henderson, and a set from DJ Akiko Love, as well as our upcoming events, including a very exciting announcement. Hello and welcome back. So from our polls, we have about, I'm going to share these. Okay, someone's already sharing it. 36% Asian, 19% Southeast Asian, American Indian or Alaska Native 2%, South Asian 3%, East Asian at 33%, Black or African American 10%, Latino, Latinx at 10%, Middle Eastern or North African at 1%, Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander 4%, and 21% are white. Thank you so much for this poll. Much love to everyone who's catching on Zoom, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch, and all the platforms. We see you and we all appreciate you. Next, we will hear from a very good friend of mine, Ashley Woodard Henderson from the Highlander Center and the Movement for Black Lives.
Thank you so much, Candy and Greg and the People's Collective family. And hey to each and every one of the hundreds, if not thousands of folks that are watching across social media and on the Zoom today. My name is Ashley Woodard Henderson. My homies call me Ash. I use she, her pronouns or anything said respectfully and in right relationship. I'm a 35-year-old, relatively light-skinned Black woman with a salt and pepper afro, glasses, and I'm sitting in my office with a black glass whiteboard behind me. I am sitting on Cherokee, Yuchi, and Chickasaw land in the great state of Tennessee. And I think to close, you've heard all the good words from my comrades before about the conditions that we're in, making meaning of the moment, giving us all language and concrete calls to action of how we can throw down in solidarity with one another. And I want to just remind you of something that you already know. I want to remind you that solidarity is actually our inheritance, that winning is also our inheritance, that this relationship between communities of color is also not new. We are not the first, last, or only to be building these kinds of relationships. Let me name a couple of names, again, people that I'm sure you know. Let's think about the relationship between Malcolm and Yuri. Let's think about James and Grace. Let's talk about the Black Panther Party and Yellow Peril. Let's talk about how the Beyond Vietnam speech, breaking the silence, that Martin Luther King Jr. gave on April 4th, a year before his assassination, declined his popularity in the United States in droves. Let's not even just talk about our history. Let's talk about the now. Let's talk about APIs for Black lives. Let's talk about all the ways that grassroots organizations across the South, the largest geographic region in the United States, across Appalachia, across this country, are coming together across our differences and are winning. Just want to remind you that capitalism, white supremacy, patriarchy, all of the systems of oppression that were discussed throughout the call have been adamantly used by a handful of folks to uphold these systems of oppression for the sake of consolidating their wealth and power at our expense, at the expense of our communities. And let's be real, that's also been impactful in all of the places that we might be able to tie ourselves to in terms of motherlands. It is our work as people of goodwill, as folks that are trying to bend the moral arc of the universe towards justice and liberation and freedom. It is our job to remember, very literally bring together all of those things that these systems of oppression would attempt to steal from us. It is our birthright to be in right relationship with one another. It is our birthright to thrive. It is our at birth right to be able to have everything that we need so that no harm needs exist. Greg already reminded us earlier of a great Adrienne Maree Brown quote that says things aren't getting worse, they're getting uncovered. And that might be true. That might be true in a lot of places. But I'd also want to argue that Eric Ward is right. That regardless of whether things are getting worse or not, regardless of what might be being uncovered or not, that the things that might be happening to our people, whether it's Atlanta or the burning of the Highlander offices on March 29th of 2019, or Charlottesville, the bombing of Black churches, the attacks on mosques and synagogues all over this country and the world, On and on and on, all the xenophobia, all of the hate that we've seen might not just be because of hateful people, might be because we're winning. It might not be that our movements are larger than they've arguably ever been, building on the legacy of our elders and ancestors. It might also be that they are having to respond to us, not just that our winning movements are responding to the conditions that we're in. Oh my goodness, what would happen if we actually moved around in the world, in our communities, in our movements like we were born to win? To do work that gets to the root of systemic and state-sanctioned violence. What would it be if we knew that we were greater together as winners, all of us, all of our strengths, all of our gifts, all of our expertise? All of this will be required of us. Practicing solidarity, not just as a theory or a value, but as something that we do every day, that we make a choice to participate in, beyond just the writing of statements and hearting social media posts, but actually practicing relationship and doing it before the next crisis. Building a big we that is reimagining how we can be safe and thrive in the world where we're all cool and we have what we need. What would it be like if we actually practice what we preached around excellence in our work? If we demanded discipline and rigor, because we deserve to feel like we can be excellent, what it feels like to be excellent, and to do it because we know our people deserve our excellence, and to do that in our work just as much as we feel entitled or committed to self-care and communal care and healing. One of my best friends, Tenjiwe McHarris, often reminds me in our movement of a great Fanon quote, that each generation must discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it. Again, every generation must discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it. And quite frankly, my loves, it's our turn. It's our turn to decide that saving the world is actually going to be our destiny. It's our life's work. And that even if we might not see all the benefits of the spoils of our labor, that we demand that we will see the changing of this country and the world in ways that no one's ever seen or dreamed about, and that anything less is a cop-out. What will be required of you today to do that? To make your lifelong commitment to learning and to being in right relationship with each other across our differences to build the social movement that we need to win? What would you do today and for the rest of your days, for the sake of seeing liberty and justice for all in practice, not just in theory? It's our turn. Let's get free together, y'all. I love you, I respect you, and I want you to be free. Peace.
Thank you, Ashley. Your words hit me just as I think about our year, since it's been a year, and the relationships and practice that is daily. The relationships I've built with Gregory, and a big shout out, I really want to big shout out to our organizing committee who convened together, including our advisory council. So thank you so much for your closing words for us, and for sharing your knowledge and stories, and everyone who's been tuning in to everyone's stories and truths and wisdom here. So now I'd like to share what we've got coming up next. And we always like to share resources and ways to get involved. So here are some ways that you can get involved and take some action. We do have some websites here that you can visit, including Asian Americans Advancing Justice in Atlanta. You could also sign on to the Collective Community Statement. These links will be dropped on the chat here, and we'll make sure to also try to drop them on the Facebook pages or across the platforms. And we'd also like you to lift up these donations to donate to victim support funds, and all donations will go directly to support the victims and their families. The fund will close Sunday, March 28th, which is tomorrow at 11 12:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, including some resources here that you can also look for crisis response resources. And including resources from some of our speakers today, including the Highlander Center website, the Movement for Black Lives website as well. And I love this quote with Ashley, just push what the Asian and Asian American orgs say, yes. And including one of our guests today who really gave us some really great mindful pauses, Edgar Fabian's Frias's link and drive, where it has a decolonial database. So please drop those links here if we can as well, but also feel free to take a screenshot of these resources. And next page, including Jamila's resources page of the WPNpower.org website. They're looking for outreach and admin volunteers, y'all. So this is a time to get involved and take action. Any financial or in-kind donations are appreciated. So more information about donations can be found on their website. They're promoting #WeMustHaveAVoice campaign, which is a sex rights awareness campaign promoting the 4 annual sex worker awareness days. The end result to trend the hashtag on an international scale. So please make sure to visit the website. And yes, good question. Can we email resources? Sure, we can definitely do that. Also, please visit Freedom Inc.'s website, including MPOP's website as well. Thank you so much, Ana Laura. And next slide, please. And I will have, what's the next slide? Other resources here, including Kumule's website, Lokilani, and then the Ka'aha Lahui o Olekona Hawaiian Civic Club. And some great points here to share: to never stop learning, never stop asking questions, knowledge is power, be true to who you are and where you come from. And everyone, please visit and take these points into consideration in the work that we need to do to never stop asking those questions and never stop learning. Always a student. And more resources, Lydia XZ Brown's website, www.lydiaxzbrown.com and www.autisticchoya.net, as well as Rosa Clemente's website, rosaclemente.net, and pronthemap.com. And then we also have NAPAF's website, the National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum. Next page. Oh, and fill out the petition as well. Sorry, I missed that. And of course, our website. In our website, if you visit it, you will also find all our past town halls. Like I said, we are in our 11th town hall today. You could watch them. They all have transcripts, including video footages, including all the forms that you can see there, all the videos that you can watch from past town halls and workshops that we've also provided in this past year, and our donation link. And I'm gonna leave Greg next to introduce our next announcement.
Thank you so much, Candy. So we're super excited. We're gonna be launching a campaign. I'm pausing for a moment. I'm seeing there's a ASL interpreter transition. Awesome, there you go. So we're launching an exciting campaign, which we're calling the Solidarity 16 Spotlight. As you know, we believe that we serve as a bridge and a way to connect folks to Asian and Asian American grassroots organizations who are doing the solidarity work, who are doing the movement building work each and every day. And so we invite you all to donate at bit.ly/solidarity, 1, 6 spotlight. And we are in the coming week, we're going to announce the 16 organizations that will be featured and the beneficiaries of this campaign. But we are inviting folks to start donating now. Because of a gracious donor, the first $25,000 that will be donated will actually be matched. And so, meaning every dollar that you give is actually going to be twice as much. as we continue to support these grassroots organizations. And if you haven't had a chance yet, please follow our social media as we begin to roll out which organizations will be the beneficiaries of our exciting fundraising campaign. Thank you, Candy, for letting me share that. Should I pass it back to you?
You could keep going.
Okay, sounds good. Next slide, please. And so as mentioned earlier, the People's Collective is going to be actually hosting collective circles. And so there's going to be some collective circles happening Thursday, April 1st, and then also Sunday, April 11th. If you are interested in being a part of any of those collective circles, please visit an RSVP at bit.ly/collective circle. Awesome. So I don't see the date on here. I think we made some updates to this slide, but we wanted to invite folks and save the date for a Solidarity, Heritage, and Pride celebration, which is going to happen on Sunday, June 27th. And we're going to have it's going to feature music from Dr. DJ Cuttin Candy, and maybe you'll see me do some dance moves. And at this time, we will also announce how much we were able to raise for that fundraiser. And thank you so much for reloading that so we can share the information with folks. Next slide. And speaking of solidarity, heritage, and pride, our big event coming up Friday, May 21st and Friday, June 4th. It's going to be our collective Unsummit on solidarity, heritage, and pride, because we are going to continue building solidarity. And it happens to be taking place during Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and as well as Pride Month. Please visit bit.ly/collective unsummit 2021 to RSVP and get more information. Awesome. So now, we're asking folks to complete an evaluation. We read every single evaluation, and it helps inform our programming moving forward. So please join us and provide some feedback at bit.ly/solidarity is our survival survey. And it's case sensitive, so please be mindful of that as well. Awesome. So we'll give it a second as folks are getting the link so that they can fill it out. Again, we are inviting folks to please complete it. It'll help us improve our programming moving forward. Next slide, please. All right, y'all, please stick around. So there's another exciting set coming up from DJ Kiko Love, but we're also inviting folks to contact us. Feel free to follow us on social media. We put all of the handles for Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook on here right now. And also invite you to visit our website to learn more about the organizing committee, the advisory council, and all of the people that put their love and care and community into making this all volunteer run collective do the best that we can for our communities. With that being said, I'm going to pass it to back to Candy, who will introduce our next exciting guest who's going to help close us out.
I'm really, really excited to introduce my very good friend who I adore and who I love tremendously, a sibling to me, a special kinship that we share, a talented artist, DJ. I love you so much. So I'm so excited you're here with us you came here with us for our Freedom Festival and honored us and really blew us away with what I didn't even realize I needed and we all needed. So I'm so glad that you're back with us here, sharing us your gifts. Please, everybody, give a beautiful round of applause and welcome my very good friend, DJ Akiko Love.
My deepest gratitude to Dr. DJ Cutting Candy, to Gregory, the People's Collective for having me here today. Thank you for the speakers and panelists for the dialogue, powerful conversation, and for their insights. I'm honored and blessed to be here to guide everyone through a short breathwork meditation. We're going to be practicing pranayama yoga. I am a Japanese American, a proud trans black tank top. I am in my space with my 2 turntables and microphone and my healing crystals here. I'm gonna give everyone a moment to grab their yoga mats, their blankets, their pillows, eye mask perhaps, healing stones and crystals. Go ahead and get comfortable. This meditation works best if you can lay flat on your back with your eyes closed, but if you can't, just be as comfortable as you can. Before we start this meditation, one of the most important things we do is to declare your intention, to state what you want out of your time and your efforts. If you're new to breathwork, perhaps just be open to see what breathwork can offer you. Maybe you want to release some stress and anxiety. Maybe you want to move some anger. Whatever resonates with you, just think about it and feel free to tap it in the chat box and so you can share with others. Now, first and foremost, this is a spiritual exercise that helps you connect with spirit. I'll let you interpret that any way you like. Physiologically, it helps reset our nervous system, gets us more grounded and connected with our body. The technique is fairly simple. There's 2 stages of the breath, the inhale and the exhale. All the breathing is done through our mouths. Okay, the first stage, we just pull oxygen from our lower belly to our upper chest. And then we just release through our mouths. Lower belly, upper chest, and then through our mouths. For those who have a medical history of epilepsy, non-drug induced seizures, or pregnant and expecting, you're gonna have you do a different technique. You're gonna just breathe through your nose for 3 seconds in, and exhale 3 seconds out. Inhale through your nose, 3 seconds in, then release through your mouth, 3 seconds out. All right. So give you a moment to get into your space, to get comfortable. Go ahead and get grounded. Take a few deep breaths through the nose, out your mouth. Take a few more. Off all that excess energy that we may have at the head, the neck, shoulders, arms, wrist, hand, finger, hips, knees, ankles, feet and toes. Just work it all out. Take a few more deep breaths through the nose, out your mouth. And whenever you're ready, let's go ahead and start that breathing cycle. Remember, everything's done through our mouths, lower belly, upper chest, outer mouths, lower belly, upper chest, out your mouths. Good. Let's try our very best to slow everything down. Give that overactive brains of ours that must deserve earn and break. Good. Try our best to get out of our minds and to tap into our hearts. And rather than think, just feel. Let's do what we can to stop all that excess chatter in our brains and to release all toxins that disempowers us. Allow yourselves to relax as deep as possible. With each cycle of the breath, feel that stress, anxiety, and fears just wash and melt off your face, neck, shoulders, back, or wherever your body holds on to it. Lower belly, upper chest, out your mouth. Breathe into your intention and breathe with gratitude. Allow yourselves to relax even deeper. Be open and receptive to love and support that your spiritual guides are showering upon you all. If you feel stuck energy in your throat or elsewhere in your body due to sadness, frustration, or rage, go ahead and let out a visceral yell or a silly laugh if you like. Whatever feels right to you. Good. Keep breathing, lower belly, upper chest, out your mouth. Feel that energy move. Let your body radiate with love and appreciation. Great job, everyone. Go ahead, return to your normal breathing pattern. Take one long inhale in through the nose. Hold. Exhale when you're ready. This is the absolute best part. You get to reap in all the benefits of your hard work. Let your body just rest, restore, and recharge. Let your mind go blank into nothingness and just be present. Enjoy the moment.
I wanna be free, so free, like a feather blowing through the breeze, like a bird in a tree, like a dolphin in the sea. wanna fly high, so high, like an eagle in the sky. And when my time has come, I'll let it all go with the sky. I'm coming home to the place where I belong. Pachamama, I'm coming home to the place where I belong. I wanna be free, be me, be the only being that I see. Not to rise and not to fall, be at one with love and all. There is no high, no low, there's nowhere else to go except inside your heart and be just who you are. Pachamama, coming home to the place where I belong. Pachamama, coming home to the place where I belong. Pachamama, coming home to the place where I belong. Pachamama, coming home to the place where I belong.
Go ahead and wiggle those toes and fingers. Come back to your space. Come back to your body. Be kind and gentle. Take your time. Let a little smile come to your face and give yourself a big hug. Thank you all for participating. Thank you for the People's Collective. I love you all. Stay blessed.
Thank you so much, DJ Kiko. Love. Again, I'm always like, I really needed that. Right, Greg? So thank you so much for closing us off with what we needed. And I'm grateful for our organizing committee who really laid the path for today and offering these beautiful and mindful pauses that we need in this time, and the reminders of our care for ourselves and one another in this moment as we also try to dismantle and end white supremacy, cis heteropatriarchy. So thank you so much for everyone who joined us on Zoom or any of our multiple platforms and who are watching this recording after the fact. Please don't forget again to fill out the evaluation. We'll follow up with a link via email. As you know, it's helpful. We do read all of our feedback. Wishing you all a great night and weekend. And remember, together we can push our dreams of liberation into fruition while we fight anti-Asian racism, while we fight white supremacy, heteropatriarchy, and protect our democracy, protect one another, keep each other safe, and build transformative cross-racial solidarity with communities of color and people most impacted. Greg, do you have any last words or closing comments you'd like to share before we end off?
No, just thank you so much for joining. We appreciate you all. Also want to shout out all of our co-sponsor organizations. These are the most organizations we had co-sponsor any of our events, all of our panelists, our speakers, and everyone for their continued support and trust and love. We do this for each other. We do this for our collective justice and liberation. And then we look forward to continuing to learn and build with you all. See you all at the next People's Collective for Justice and Liberation event. Until then, take care